I'm Scott McGinley. Roger Lehman put together most of the information on here. Roger, thank you very much. And on communication and transportation. And I'm not going to have, or Roger didn't put in solutions. What we're really doing here tonight is just giving you something to think about on how you would operate in a couple different scenarios. And I'm going to go off script just a little bit here to start with. And to start, I've had a couple of these speeches, or gave, not a speech, but just my opinions at the coffee shop or downtown or maybe at the city council meeting. Most of it just feels negative when I'm done. I mean, they just go, geez. And so I try to follow up as a rule with this, but I'll start it with this tonight. And it's what I want to always say is this is the most wonderful time to be alive. I mean, how in this age to be alive, it's probably the best since the Garden of Eden. I mean, we're that close to Jesus Christ returning, in my opinion. How is it that we live at a time that lines up with Jehovah God's calendar and a time for the return of Jesus and His righteous saints? I mean, He promises to deliver us from wrath of God, not from the persecution, which everybody's getting, but we're, the wrath we're protected from, and in our eyes, that's elevated a lot in the United States in the last 60 years. So, can you imagine the protection we'll receive as believers or followers of Jesus Christ? I don't know what that's going to be, but I can hardly wait to see what it looks like, and especially if it looks like the land of Goshen and the Passover. I mean, God delivered from the Passover. That's amazing, and the rest didn't. And Judah enjoyed protection. So when the heavens open up, I want to make it to when the heavens actually open up and Jesus Christ and the angels arrive. I mean, I really think that's going to be neat to be able to make it to that point in the game. Whether we are standing there or we're on earth or we're in heaven at that point when we get to see it, I think it's something that's going to be glorious. And so when we talk about this, we want to prepare for the worst and then hope for the best, and that the non-believers and the Antichrist can possibly hand us. And so that's our part tonight, is just to talk a little bit about the communication and transportation and what's going on out here and what we think. And so with that, along with that, I'm not going to make it an hour. And I don't know if everybody but Philip can ask a question, because it'll be way it's way past my pay grade to be able to answer his questions. So that's why I wish he was here to hear that. So communication and transportation. I've listened to quite a bit of stuff. I had my knees operated on in January. I had a chance to listen to a lot of the prepper stuff and a lot of just what's coming down the pipe from the Prophecy Channel and the food program that we're doing. I mean, there's people that started that ahead of time that we did, and it falls right in line with what I think Jesus Christ is leading us to. But it's interesting in communication and transportation. I'll just give you from Steve Harris. He's a guy that's on Rude Awakening and a born-again believer, and talks about how you prep for a possible catastrophe. And it's interesting. I'm going to give you his top 12, and we'll see where communication and transportation comes in. Breathing is the number one issue that you have. If I cover your mouth up, and you're going to start kicking instantly. I mean, if you can't breathe. And so people ask these questions that are way out of whack. And he says, breathing's an issue. And what's the problem with that breathing is maybe sand, dust, chemical spills, fire, smoke. Number 2, body armor. He says you don't need holes in your body. It's from gunshots, knives, or rusty nails. Number 3 is clothing. That is the number one thing, he said, is your mobile survival equipment is more important than food or water. I went, what do you mean by that? And then he explained it. If you're in Mandan, North Dakota, or worse yet, Williston, and it's 20 below, and you got a jacket and get caught out there in the middle of a snowstorm, water and food ain't going to do you no good. You're going to die. It's just too dang cold. Unless you find oil well standby. And Biden's trying to shut all of them off. So I don't know how good that is. But so that thought process is your clothing is part of your shelter, which comes later about number 10. Treatment of injury, you got to be able to have blood stop, first aid. What happens if snake bites you? How do you handle that? Number 5, daily medication. We're not to transportation, and we're into communication yet. Daily medication, some people won't make it in the morning if they don't have their medicine tonight. So we have to have that thought process when we're preparing for the very worst. And then finally hydration. But then that means everything that goes with hydration, like water purification and transportation and storage. If you're afoot and you don't have gas and you don't have any way to carry your water, what would you do? And one of the things he said is that the most important piece of equipment that you could possibly ask for right now, if you ran into a jam and everything went down, do you know what that would be? Well, that's one thing, but the big deal is a steak knife, a serrated steak knife. That's his number one idea that you probably need to have. And the reason is you can cut rope, you can cut pillowcases, you can trim, you can carve, you can cut plastic, you can do anything with that steak knife. And then if FEMA comes along and brings a steak dinner, then you're ready to eat. But the whole idea behind that is if you, as an example, if you need to carry water, you can get you a pillowcase, you can put a plastic bag in there, fill it up, tie it off with rope that you just cut up, do another one, throw them on your shoulders, and now you have water transportation. Dump it out, fill it over there, and you can float across the creek. So the point being is, when you think about some of this stuff, is you know, how do you take care of your hydration? Illumination. He said the stupidest thing you can do is tell somebody to buy a flashlight. What you do say is go get an LED flashlight with D-cell alkaline batteries. Now you've enabled that guy to live in the day that's half dark. So it's pretty interesting when you go, and we're still not to communication and transportation yet. Nutrition, finally, you don't need broccoli if you're hungry. You don't need nutrition, you need calories. And does anybody have the best idea for gathering calories at a cheap price? It's called shortbread cookies. 2,200 calories per pound, made from sugar, flour, and no water, and butter, and they last forever. So going on through there, shelter, of course, is back to number 3. That's your clothing, and now your home or your tent or what you're going to live in. And then finally, number 10 is communication. Number 11 is radiological, bacteria protection, antibodies, Medicare, painkiller, and then finally number 12, transportation. So in that list from Mr. Harris, we get clear down to 10 and 12 before it's really, really important. But try walking after that water. I live about 4 miles from Rapid Creek, and then about 200 miles from the wastewater pond, over east. I mean, how's that going to work? I better have something to filter my water, because it ain't going to taste very good out of the pond over there. And I don't know if I'm going to make it well, I can make it now. I got new knees, 5 miles to get water 4 miles. So anyway, that's all my preliminary stuff that I wanted to just talk a little bit about, and I hope you enjoyed it. And so we're going to go on here and start with Bill Clements is going to come up in just a minute on communication and transportation. I'll try to flip forward on this. Our objective, Roger put together. Roger did a great job on this, of just an objective to understand the challenges of communication and transportation in an emergency. You will need to communicate with family, neighbors, community, and church members. You will also need to transport supplies, people, share resources in serving others. So the objective is to understand the challenges, and then understand how to communicate, and then how are you going to transport your product and your supplies. And this gets to be a little complicated, and some of the reasons for that is because of this next little slide we have right here. If it'll come up, does it say short-term power up there?
No.
Huh?
One more time.
One more time.
One more time?
There you go.
Short-term power. So short-term power outage, tornado, blackouts, and snowstorms are pretty easy to overcome. We overcome Atlas here a few years ago, and that didn't take horribly long, 3 days to 5 days as a rule to get everybody back in. But if we have a cyber attack, what are we going to do when the power grid, internet, radio, frequencies, and cell phones and computers all quit? Have you tried that? I mean, what happens when that phone won't turn on?
Yeah.
And we don't have, Carol and I have a landline because she has a daycare. But I mean, who are we going to call? I'm going to call her mom in Padoka, but that's about it. That's the only number I know. And the rest of my cell phone was just got burned by the cyber attack. So, the other thing is, and here's one that we've talked about, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, is electromagnetic, EMP. Electromagnetic pulse, damage I don't know if our government or a foreign government that would think this would be the perfect deal, because it is going to ruin everything. They say if you have points and plugs, like in a 72 Chevy pickup, or before that, 70, 69 on down, that it'll probably start and it'll probably run. But anything with computer over and above that, electronic ignition, not going to run unless you got it protected. And how do you protect it? Well, there's an outfit in Kansas that says that it's called EMP Shield Company, and they say that they can protect your vehicles and your home. And what they do is this pulse, and I can't explain it exactly, but what happens, they blow up a bomb in the atmosphere, and it comes down and it puts real sharp, quick, high-powered lightning type pulses through your electronics until it just fries them. And you ground this on a vehicle, I guess, to the frame, and I don't know how they ground it on your home, but it's supposed to save your home. I don't know how expensive that stuff is. It's not cheap, but it's not way expensive either. You still have some protection on that if it works. They swear it does. They said they did it by the government standards. You read the next article, and they said that government standards could never ever be tested because the government won't turn loose the information so you can test against it. So I don't know who to believe. I just don't know. But I have old 81 diesel, 350 diesel, that if I can get it started, then it'll probably be okay, according to Jason. So anyhow, the electromagnetic, that would just ruin everything. I mean, it would really wreck the whole program if you understand that. I can't imagine our government doing that to us, but I can see, China or one of them guys trying that program out to see if it would work. So the government shutdown is another level, and what I'm doing here was this short term is a cyber attack, government shutdown. Those guys then can control our communication. They just can, and they can open it back up too. And then we can listen to the New World Order, what they got in mind for that program. So, and then us that don't want to listen to that, we just stay in lockdown, I guess, and figure out how to get water to the house. Communication, it's what still works in that case. So if it goes completely down, how are you going to handle it? I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, if you really stop to think about that, well, then what I'll try to do there, Roger, and you're a saint, you know that? Did that flip it to communication? So what are we going to do? I mean, has anybody got any hot ideas? I mean, really, you can read the deal that Roger wrote up. It says use face-to-face travel or to an in-person rendezvous or send an ambassador. Use a courier for written or package delivery. If required by circumstance, leave your tracking technology elsewhere. That would be the case probably if it was government shutdown. Because if it's cyber attack, I mean, everything, that's that phone's in a paperweight. Is all it really is, because it won't turn on. And so, what still works? And this is just to inspire some thought, because this is just the first step on this transportation. I don't have a solution, and I apologize for not being able to bring that to you this evening on how to take care of an EMP program. Other than, by the way, on the EMP program, there is one fail-safe way they tell me, and it's called a Faraday box. And it's kind of like, it's a garage that is, for the lack of better terms, is it's made up like out of a giant microwave. For a lack of better terms, they say if you put your electronics and you have that in a microwave oven, that EMP won't touch it. A Faraday box is a garage that you park your vehicles, you put your essentials in, that if we have that kind of attack, you can still crank that up and still go somewhere and get something done. Which means then you would have a target on your back. Right. Somebody else wanted that piece of equipment to drive around more than you did. So the shotgun guy right here, and this guy right here with that AR-15, is that what that is, right? They come in pretty handy to have each one of those right along with you, in my opinion. So this kind of fits all together, don't it? How am I doing? Is this okay so far? All right. So a number of the radios, so I'll do a lot better most of the time if I know what I'm talking about. I practice this, and it'll be fun. But I tell you, it's a little bit more serious than you would like to have. So I'm trying to lighten it up a little bit. But please understand that if I don't know, this digital dollar problem is the biggest one in my opinion. I mean, we can talk about all the EMP and all the rest of it, but when we get to a digital dollar, and there's feedback in this room, that if you touch that digital dollar, you know, you're on the way to eternal death with Mr. Satan. And the alternative to that is going to be, eternal life in Jesus Christ. And how are we going to handle that? We may not be significant, but nevertheless, it is an issue. And if you touch that digital dollar, you know, it's robbed. If you don't touch it, then you're in pretty good shape. If you do, I mean, but you're going to have to fend for yourself, or we're going to have to fend for each other. That's just what it boils down to. But that's why this community is gathered together, in my humble opinion, why we're trying to do this, is so we can survive and see that return of Jesus Christ. That would be the wonderful part right there. So handheld radios are walkie-talkies, radios, and right now what we're going to do is we're going to stop for a minute and we're going to ask Bill Clements to come up, and we want to talk about these handheld walkie-talkies. This is a walkie-talkie that Tony Rhodes set up for Roger Lehman, has extended battery, extended antenna, and I can talk about 3 miles away from Roger. And if Roger gets on his roof, I think I can hear everything he says. But I told him to stay off the roof. I'll just drive a little bit closer. But we got about 3 miles away before it finally, anyway. So I don't understand FMRS, which I'll need to go forward here, correct? Are we there?
Yeah, great.
Is that FMRS? And GMRS and MURS. So if you come up, Bill Clements, I will get off this stage for a little bit. And there's solar back, while we're waiting for him, we get solar backup power. I really want to talk about that for a minute. Come on up, Bill. Thank you.
I can't compete with that. All right, okay. So a couple things I'll talk about. You mentioned EMP. You know, you'll hear people say, well, that's just a conspiracy theory thing, and that's not real, and if it were really that powerful, some other government would have used it against us and everything. But when you think about it, if you do the research, early on when they were researching nuclear weapons, EMP was a problem. It was a problem because they were concerned that any kind of aircraft or something dropping a nuclear bomb, that EMP would shut that aircraft down, and that aircraft is going to crash. And so the people delivering the bombs were basically going to be kamikazes, right? But it didn't take them long to realize, wow, the power of that EMP from that bomb could actually be more devastating than the bomb itself. So the EMP is real. It has happened naturally a couple different times from solar flares and so forth. And normally they're minor and they cause minor disruptions, but there's been some big ones that have caused some serious disruptions in communication and damaging some sensitive electronic equipment. So if you can research early EMPs and things like that, you'll find that they have happened and they can happen. And we could have a big one, a solar flare from the sun, a really big one that could really cause us a problem naturally, so that could happen.
Carrington event.
What's that?
Carrington event.
Yes, that's exactly what that is. So research that and you'll find it. The Harrington event?
Carrington with a C.
Carrington event. So that really happens, and that you know, it's out there. Talking about a Faraday cage, that's just a device that blocks. The blocks or interrupts that radio signal or that powerful signal that messes with your electronic communication. That's all it is. So they come in all different sizes. You mentioned the large ones for cars and stuff. You can get small ones. You can make small ones to protect radios and small devices if you do have an EMP. So if you have a series of radios you want to use in emergency communication in case things really go down, you should keep those in a Faraday cage or a Faraday box. So if you do have an EMP, those radios aren't going to be destroyed. You can take them out and use them. So I'm not going to cover the details of those. They're pretty simple. You can buy them or make them, but they exist out there. So probably every hand in the room, I guess. You can be watching TV and it's kind of late in the evening and it's dark and all of a sudden your power just goes out. It's just gone. You're sitting there in the dark, right? Not everybody's sitting right by a flashlight, so you're like, okay, where's the flashlight? Who's going to go for it? And you're trying to either strike a match or use a lighter or something to go find your flashlight. And you're in the dark for a while, but you have a flashlight. So think about what would happen if communications went down completely, okay? As far as a power outage, so to speak. So your cell phone, what a lot of people don't understand, a cell phone is a radio. That's all it is. And that cell phone doesn't talk from here to China. That cell phone talks from where you're standing to the closest radio tower. And that radio tower digitizes that signal, sends it through the internet, and it goes across the world. Okay, that's how that works. So your cell phone really doesn't have a lot of range. And if you want to test that, drive around in the hills or something until you have no signal, and try talking to the person right next to you. Call their number. You can't even talk to the person sitting right there because it's not getting to a tower to relay that information. So cell phones really, I mean, it's a good invention. It's fantastic when it works. But if power goes down to those cell phone towers, you have no cell phone communication. And if we have a major event, such as an EMP or a major storm situation that really knocks out a large portion of the power grid, we have no communication because we can't use our cell phones. And if you don't have a radio on battery backup or a radio that you can have on a solar backup, you really have no communication. It's going to your neighbor's house and saying, hey, what happened? Do you know? And he's like, I don't know. I don't have a phone either. Communication can be a really, really big problem. So that's where radios come in. If you have a radio, you can either have stored batteries, you can have solar backup, you can have a solar panel connection that you have, as long as the sun's shining, you have instant power. But you have a radio to communicate and to get out. Don't be deceived about radio communication because we think, well, the military, they can get on radios and they can just talk all over the place. Everybody has the same problems. Radios are limited with range, but they all work with repeaters. On this little map we got down here, the purpose of that, I'm sorry, I was not standing close to the microphone, so maybe you can hear me now. That map back there, people were putting push pins in there where their location and where they live if they have one of these radios. So there's not very many marks on this map. Joan pulled the push pins and put little stickers on here so you can see it better.
Bill, do you want to use a headset?
So I'll just stand here with this.
Okay.
Because I don't have a lot left to go, I guess. So there's not very many on there compared to the amount of radios we sent out. I don't know how many, Tony, but I'll bet it's probably close to 300 radios or more.
Close.
A lot of radios have went out to people in this church. And if you look on that map, those circles on there, walk up there and look at this afterwards. Those circles are only 3-mile circles. Okay, these radios, depending on the antenna, you can get up to 30 miles on these things or more, depending on the circumstance. So when you talk about 3 miles, that's a really easy distance. And I know some people have been testing and trying these out, and I can't talk to my neighbor across the street. Line of sight is really important, and depending on how you have these radios set up, UHF is fantastic for going through buildings and walls, but there's not a lot of distance. VHF is great for distance, but it doesn't go through a lot of objects. It's kind of a trade-off. So you have to learn to change your radio from UHF to VHF depending on where you're at. But the whole point of this is radios, to get long distance, they work through repeaters. Like there's a repeater in Rapid City up here at the airport. And there's repeaters all over the Black Hills, and they're all linked together. So if your radio will reach any one of those repeaters, they talk to each other so you can communicate all over. So any place I'm at in the Black Hills area that I don't have good cell phone service, I can take my handheld radio and I can talk to Joan at my house out by Sturgis. I always have communication all the time with this little simple radio right here. So, because I use the repeaters, but you have to be licensed, a ham radio license to use repeaters. Now in an emergency, you don't.
Bill, in the event of a power outage, won't those repeaters be down low?
Okay, most of the repeaters are on battery backup, and some of them have solar backup.
Okay.
So they will be working for a while, and they do have generators on them also to generate and keep them going for a while, because they are part of an emergency communication system. In an emergency, you can't use those repeaters, but it's got to be life and death emergency, not just I'm out of gas and I need some help. So,
They're not protected from EMP though, are they?
no, they're not. They're not. So, okay, what a repeater is, I'll use this as an example. Okay, let's say there's 30 people in this room. If we all spaced ourselves out 100 feet apart, that's a lot of distance. What is that? 3,000 feet. Okay? I could shout something to the closest person. Well, they can turn around and shout it to the next person, and I could get my message out 3,000 feet pretty quick if everybody just relayed that information. That's the way a repeater works. When you talk to a repeater on the radio, it takes your signal, and then it broadcasts it with a much more power to a longer distance right away. Whatever you say, it transmits it. And it's instant, there's no delay. When you talk, somebody else hears you. But what that repeater is doing is taking what you say on one channel and transmitting it on another channel just that fast. But it transmits it at much more power than any radio you're sending to that repeater. Now that being said, all these radios in the church, and the purpose of this map, if everybody has their radios on and leaves them on the same channel, our entire community, we are all each other's repeaters. So if I say something, somebody's going to hear what I say. And if they repeat what I say, the other people that are close to them are going to hear what I say. And those are only 3-mile circles on that map right there. So if we use the radios correctly, we should have no problem at all communicating with just about everybody in our church. There may be some outliers that may have some problems, but for the most part, we have fantastic communications. But it has to require everybody leaving their radios on the same channel all the time and sharing information. So that's how the radio works. Radio waves, if you could see radio waves, we couldn't see at all. This room is so full, you'd be like in a bowl of spaghetti. They're just everywhere. But the radio, the old AM radios in your cars, you turn the dial until you tuned into the station you want. You're trying to find that frequency. On modern radios, you just program it in, and it's the number. It's not the frequency that you tune to. So that's kind of how that works. But we do have good communication.
You leave it plugged in and on all the time?
To charge it, take it off the charger and turn it on.
Turn it on.
Yeah, you don't want to leave it in the charger on. You have to charge it and then take it out of the charger. And somebody in the back had it. So Mike?
So, can we be blocked out of that repeater? I mean, isn't that government controlled by the federal government?
Nope, it's not controlled by the government at all. It's controlled by ham radio operators in the Black Hills.
Oh, okay.
They control it and it belongs to them. It's all fully funded by them. The government has nothing to do with it.
If there's an EMP attack, what's it do to your radio when it's not even dirty?
It could be shielded. It depends on the location that it's stored. If you read the book like 1 Second After and some other things like that, it says if we have a big enough EMP, everything's going to be wiped out unless it's protected. And there could be different strengths of EMPs take place, and it may affect some cars, it may not affect some other cars, some electronics may work, some may not. But it is going to be majorly disruptive for all of our communication electrical stuff. So some radios may make it. But if you have 2, put 1 in a Faraday cage. If you have 4, put 2 or 3 in there and just use the 1, but protect something if you have that. Yes, ma'am.
What is the channel that we're supposed to be on?
Channel 3. Channel 3. Or Channel 7. Now this is FRS. So when you turn your radios on, these have been pre-programmed. So if you go to FRS, that stands for Family Radio Service. That's a frequency that you can use unlicensed. You're not supposed to use it with the amount of power that these transmit. You can transmit on low power and be legal with that. The thing is, the FCC, there are so many people who use these radios and use these frequencies, the FCC does not regulate that, other than they'll just tell you you're not supposed to do that. That's against the law. You could be fined a lot of money. They've never fined anybody, and there's thousands and thousands of people using these. So it's up to you. If in an emergency, I don't think it really matters. In an emergency, you can use repeaters, and it's not going to matter. So any other questions about getting licensed, ham licensed, or GMRS, which is the General Mobile Radio Service, just get with me on that.
Well, 2 things. Can you explain that? The ham radio, I understand, but can you explain that?
Okay, so ham radio came about a long time ago, many years ago. It's just a group of college kids, and all of their last names started with H, A, or M. So they called it ham radio. That was their little club. That's where ham radio term came from. But all ham radio it's amateur radio. And it's not amateur in a sense that it's people that don't know a lot about radios. There's amateur and there's commercial. Commercial is radio stations, TV stations. They're the professionals. Everybody else is amateur, regardless of your knowledge about radios and how you use them. So that's what ham radio really is. If you get a basic ham license, I don't know, $15 to get the license. You take a 35-question test and you're licensed for like 10 years. And there's no test to renew. Once you get it, you pretty much always have it if you just go pay the fee. But it really gives you the right to transmit on a lot of frequencies and do a lot more things with radios than the average person can do. When you buy a radio from Cabela's or Shields or something like that, those hunting radios, it says right on the package, this radio transmits to 50 miles and 30 miles. They have far less power than these Baofeng radios. So that statement is only true if you are absolutely good weather, hilltop to hilltop, or standing out in the desert where you can see the next guy. That's the only way it works like that. Otherwise it doesn't. So these are very good radios that we have here. They're, money-wise, they're not very expensive, and quality-wise, you know, if you break one, get another one. There's better quality radios, but these are very powerful radios. So they're powerful to the point the FCC actually, there was a lawsuit to try to stop the company that makes these out of China and not even import them into the United States. And they lost, so we still have these radios here. So they are really good radios. So there's a lot more to them than I can really go into here, but if there's any other radio questions, it's just really important that we have some kind of communications. Yes?
Do you have a different antenna that you buy for these?
You can. There's antennas. This one right here is called a Nagoya. It's Nagoya. And it's a little bit longer than the standard antenna that comes with it. That adds about 12 kilometers on average to how far you can transmit with these radios.
And where did you get that antenna?
Online, on the internet, go to Amazon or something.
Amazon or Nagoya.
No, you can listen to anything. There's no law against listening to anything. Okay? Transmitting is a different story. You can't interfere with the police and EMS services. And with these radios, you can listen to the police and fire department and all different kinds of things, but you can't interfere. If you start causing interference, that's when you're going to get in trouble. But everyday usage and you're not bothering anybody is not that big of a deal. But with any radio, any signal that can make it to this radio, you can hear it. But transmitting a signal requires power. And there's only like 8 watts of power maximum on these radios. Like our car radio, on our home base radio is 60 watts, so we can transmit a lot farther. But you can get radios of more power. You can't, no matter how much you pay, you can't get handheld radios that transmit more than about 8 to 10 watts, because that's too much energy to have next to your head. You'll be talking like Joe Biden if you have too much power. So you don't want that, right? You don't want that next to your head. So even expensive radios don't have that much power, right? So you're kind of limited there. So that's kind of how that works. You can Google the ham radio channel for the International Space Station and program it into this radio. And when it's flying over, if they're using that channel, you can listen to everything they say, but you only have about 10 minutes. Horizon to horizon, but you can listen to the International Space Station transmissions on these radios, so they're pretty powerful.
Yeah, you can set them up as a scanner too.
Yeah, set it up as a scanner, so it just runs through all those channels, so anybody talking, it'll stop when it catches that communication.
A lot of battery.
Yes.
I think as far as a Faraday cage, those steel sheds would be a good Faraday, as good as you're going to get.
Yes.
But make sure you're out of your steel shed when you're trying to transmit out, because then you're just frying yourself.
Exactly. Yep, you've got to be outside for these things to work. And it's kind of strange because one building may block the signal altogether, but another building won't block it at all. You know, if you have your cell phone and you go into the basement of Shills, you can't talk on your cell phone, but it works upstairs. Basements of some other buildings, it'll work just fine. It depends on the construction of the building and so forth. So that's how that works. So,
Hey, Will.
yes, ma'am.
To Michael's question about the FCC and controlling, they don't control the local repeaters that these radios work off of, but the FCC controls what you can transmit on, as far as that's the difference. When they don't have local control of the repeaters, but they do on, tell me, FCC and the, how much wattage, is that what that?
How much wattage you're regulated and how much wattage you use and everything. As far as I know, I've only been able to find one instance where one person was fined up to $14,000 for interfering with communication with the Baofeng radio. Only one. But what they were doing it on a regular basis. They were interfering with an emergency weather net every night, and they would get on there and make noise, play music, and they kept interfering. Well, that's what's called fox hunting. Radio clubs do it on purpose. They'll put a radio somewhere and they'll take the key down, so it's always transmitting, and they will go, the club members will go find that radio, and it could be taped to a tree out in the woods somewhere, and they'll find it through triangulation. So they can find you if you're interfering. But it takes effort, and it takes time, and it takes people. So if you're not interfering with anybody's business, there's no reason for them to track you down. So don't, you're bothering somebody's business, and they say, hey, we're, stop talking, we're conducting business. Well, stop talking. Don't cause problems with that. So other than that, any other questions on that?
You said to keep them in the charger when they're charged, take them out and turn them off.
Take them out and turn them on. Yeah, if they're in the charger, don't turn them on. Leave them off to fully charge, and then take them out and turn them on. And I know it can be kind of a hassle, but if you have the charger in your kitchen or something like that, just keep it charged. If we use those on purpose in the church to do tests or different things like that, we'll let you know when we're going to do that, and then you can just turn it on. But if things are starting to look really bad for various reasons, then we're all going to want to keep our radios on so we have communications.
So in that situation where everything goes down, you have an opinion of the very best power source to invest in, whether it be a Honda generator or solar. You got the 4 Patriot stuff on there, you got anything from $1,500 to $3,500. I mean, where does a guy start to look at the worst case scenario, what you should do that would take care of you in the worst case, or if you just have power outage from Atlas again or something?
Okay, like other things, guns and everything else, I'd say get the best you can afford. And depending on your budget, there's still good stuff for all levels of budgets out there. Solar is really, really good. You have some sort of solar source. Even if it's a low power source, it'll still charge a 12-volt battery over time. And most ham radios or commercial radios are 12 volt. When you buy those radios, they can mount in a car, or if you mount it in your home, you have to have a power converter to change it from AC to DC 12 volt. So you can buy inexpensive converters out there, or solar panels. They're not very big, and they're all set up to charge a 12-volt battery, like a car battery, and you have your radio connected to that battery. So it always maintains it all the time. So on any power outage, you still have power to your radio. As far as your home and solar chargers and solar generators, there's all different levels of expense and cost out there. So, yes, sir.
All generators run on fuel.
Yep.
Whether it's gasoline or kerosene or whatever.
Yeah.
And if the EMP occurs, the pumps that pump that fuel out of the tank that's underground up and fill your tank is going to be shot.
Yep.
So your generator's only good for the amount of fuel that's in it at the time you turn it on.
Yeah. That's correct.
Same way with if you have this 81 diesel car of yours that'll work. You may start it, but it's only going to last for as long as the fuel is in it, because where are you going to go get more diesel fuel?
Yep.
The pumps are all out.
Exactly.
Yep. Sandy?
What about solar generators?
Solar generators are very good. They're very reliable. So solar generators they're good. And there's really not many parts to wear out on your solar panel, the collector.
You don't need fuel.
You don't need fuel for that. So any other questions?
I got one of those 4 Patriot solar generators, and it said not to store it in a building that is over, I think it was 120 degrees for 8 or 9 days. So I was wondering if and then also, I think in the really cold, you don't want it to sit in the garage. So it's probably something you want to keep in the basement or something? Or?
So it has a weather limitation. Keep it in the basement, because any basement or root cellar, that temperature is not going to fluctuate near as much as when you're open.
I think it's kind of common. Anybody want to see what an EMP might look like?
Okay.
There was a TV show out called Revolution.
Revolution, TV show Revolution.
Yeah, everything went bye-bye.
Everything's gone. Yep.
It's kind of like, it's a sci-fi.
It's possible, though. It's entirely possible. Yes, sir.
Just in response to that, I've added 2 EcoFlow solar generators in the past month to our house. They're running about $500, and the solar panels are extra. So now we can solar charge a battery generator that we can move what we want it to. Takes 3 inputs for 110 power. Has capability of doing 220. it takes, I think it could pack 1200 watt maximum, 600 watts sustain,
Okay,
and very portable.
okay.
Echo flow.
All right, Echo Flow. He's the guy to talk to right there. Another question over here? Okay,
I kind of have a question.
Okay.
So thinking about, we got the chins on the map, and we got the radios all fired up, and things are getting strange. What are we gonna say to each other?
okay, so I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have found out from this radio stuff that people in the church are intimidated to talk to each other. We're all friendly people, right? Talk to each other. You don't have to use no radio jargon or lingo like CBs and all that kind of stuff. We put a list back there for you to pick a radio call sign to use. You don't have to use that. We were just trying to simplify it and try to make it where you could talk to each other without giving up who you are and where your location is if you respect your privacy. But you can get on the radio like we're ham license operators. I'm driving around Rapid City into a board. I'll just say, hey, this is KE0OUI monitoring. And that's all I'll say. And then somebody else will jump on there and say, hey, KE0OUI, this is, so they'll give their call sign. And then if I know them, I'll say, hey, John, how's it going? Where are you going? I'm going to the store to get some bread. Good, I got to stop for gas right now, and we're going to fish later. You just have a conversation. It doesn't matter. Just talk to somebody. Talk to your neighbors. Find out who's around you. And it doesn't matter. We've talked to perfect strangers before. We don't even know who they are. I was talking to one guy, and he said, well, I'm in Wheatland, Wyoming. This was like last week. I was shocked. They were that far away in Wheatland, Wyoming, just driving down the road. So just talk to people. Just be friendly. Get friendly
Do
people.
they have to have the same radios then? Like you said,
You have to be on the
something
same
with
channel.
Wyoming, do they have that same radio?
They don't have the same radio, but they were on the same frequency. And so we were going through a repeater up on the hill in Rapid City, and this linked to Terry Peak and Bear Mountain and Hot Springs and so forth. So somehow from Wheatland, he was able to hit one of those repeaters. That's how I was able to communicate with him. That's where your ham license comes in. So if you can get that, it gives you a lot more range and frequency and stuff. But if you do turn on your radio, there's a lot of people in this church that have radios. Somebody's going to be out there listening. Just don't be afraid to talk back. If somebody's calling and say, hey, this is Bob. Anybody out there? Just pick it up. Hey, yeah, Bob, this is Bill. What's going on? And you don't have to share personal information like, hey, where are you at? Where are you calling from? Some people don't want to do that, but they just want to talk. So you can do that. So.
Something else for you to think about when you're talking about these radios and things. If we lose communication, our normal communication stuff, think about how many times every day you talk to somebody on your phone or whatever. Now cut that off. My wife is a nurse. She's taking care of a lot of COVID patients. And one of the worst things for those patients is that they were cut off from their families while they were in the hospital because no one could come visit them.
Yeah.
So if you think about being isolated in your home, you can't get out, or maybe you can get out, but you don't even know where everybody's at. You don't know what's going on. It might be nice to just talk to somebody, because just to have that human interaction is good.
Yeah.
So that's one good thing about it. The other thing is, maybe you need medical help or something. If something happens and you're trapped, or whatever, fall down, whatever it is, you've got that radio handy. You can talk to somebody, hopefully in our church community, that's on, that can say, oh, I know exactly who could help you with that. Let me see if I can relay that to whoever. And it might bounce around, do this repeating thing that we're talking about, and you may get somebody who's way outside your radio, but they can help you. Maybe they can find a way to get to you and give you what assistance you need.
Yeah.
So think about that in emergency situation stuff. It's hard for everybody to think about how you're going to use this radio because we're so not used to doing that. And these guys are using them all the time, just regular like their cell phones. But that's how you got to think about these radios when you're going to put them in play for yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Well, like if you have a true emergency and you have these Baofeng radios from the church, they're pre-programmed in there. And you're in the Rapid City area, go to Rapid. It says Rapid on that bottom row. And you have a true emergency. It's known in the radio community worldwide that you either say break, 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 or mayday, mayday, mayday. Either of those right there. Everybody else stops talking, and if nobody's talking, but their radio's on, they're going to listen. And chances are somebody is going to hear you. You say those three words, either version, and tell them what your emergency is, and somebody's likely going to come back and say, okay, where are you at? I can help you. So
You don't want to start out with your emergency message and then halfway through is when someone picks something up. So if you say break, 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 then that's a long enough time frame and you're speaking for long enough, then someone can either, if your radio is on scan, like John was saying, you know, it'll give them the chance to actually push that button so that they can stop their scanning and hear what you are saying. They'll say, you know, turn your radio on and just leave it on. Well, on these channels, you know, this FRS3 channel, you're not going to hear anybody on there unless someone gets on there specifically. If you want to listen only to what radio traffic can sound like, don't dare talk on it. It's a ham radio channel, like we've been saying. But turn your radio on, and at 9 o'clock, make sure your display here says rapid, and you can hear people talk on the ham radio channel at 9 o'clock at night. So you can just get used to hearing people on the radio and kind of how it works. It's different, but it's not anything that you can't figure out, and the more familiar you are with it, the more apt you're going to be able to use it and just not be intimidated by it. So again, you know, the net's on.
This is a radio
Are you gonna
net.
check in?
This happens every night at 9 o'clock. This is emergency weather.
And I have N0DUW with traffic, and I have N0DU back. Dave, give me the suffix, the prefix of your other call. Okay. KB0, Kilo Bravo 0, Whiskey Charlie Joyce.
So this is the ham radio net every night at 9 o'clock. There's a group of people that get on this radio net and they give weather reports and they just talk for a period of time, and what that does, that ensures that that group of people knows without a doubt they can talk to other people in that group in an emergency if they have to. And every single night it's a verification that everybody's radio works.
This will give you an idea of what our radio communication will be like if we have to get a hold of you in an emergency. So you, like I said, you kind of get used to what that radio, you know, traffic sounds like. But even if you have it turned to one of these channels to listen to all the time, if it's the rapid channel, which is a ham radio channel, if you turn it to that, you're not going to hear constant chatter. Some people have said, well, I don't think it works because I don't hear anything. Well, you're not going to hear constant chatter. It's not like a radio station or a talk show. You're just not going to hear anything constantly. But know that at 9 o'clock at night, you can hear things going on the radio. So if there's an emergency, we can set up a time where if there's going to be a message during an emergency that we want to get out to people at Landmark, well, turn your radio on because this is when you're going to hear news about what's going on from someone at Landmark, and you won't feel so isolated and alone. Scott, where'd you go? Yeah, right there. Okay, because it's true. I mean, isolation really wreaks havoc on people. So if there's a time, and nothing's established yet, but we would like to just get the idea across to you that this is how it's going to happen. At such and such a time, either every day or every Monday, you're going to know that someone you know from Landmark is going to be on that channel. So if you need to get a message out to someone, then you'll know, like this, 9 o'clock every night, someone's going to be there. If you need to get a message, then get on the radio and someone's going to be listening. So that's the point. Get used to listening to the radio and just knowing that at that certain time, someone's going to be there. That's what this communication on the radio during emergencies is going to be helpful for. And you're not going to be out there alone wondering, well, when am I ever going to be able to hear from someone? Well, it's a scheduled radio net.
They were actually talking last night how many people heard the storm last night?
Oh, yeah.
Okay? There was some ham operators talking about the storm, the high winds, what's going to happen, is there any emergencies, you know, do we need to rebroadcast any emergency things? And that was on probably 3 minutes after the storm hit, and they were talking about it.
Yeah, it's pretty fast. Being a ham radio operator, the National Weather Service calls us at home on our telephone sometimes. Says, hey, what's happening in your location right now? We want to know. So they can verify their instruments and everything like that. So the ham radio community, it's out there. You just don't hear it unless you're involved in it.
So to transmit, you should be outside.
You can transmit inside, and sometimes it's fine. Sometimes it's better outside. So you don't have to go outside just to talk to your neighbor. If it's working in your house, that's fine. I can stand in my kitchen. We're 30-something miles from the Rapid City repeater. With this radio on Rapid City, I can talk to the repeater, which will link the Black Hills from my kitchen, just standing inside my house. I'm 30-something miles away.
Carry, yeah, because even like, yeah, sometimes standing outside does help. So we were only a few miles away from you when you were at the campground.
Yeah.
And you know, John was still in Minnesota, but she was calling because it was during the fire months ago out there, right? Wonderland Homes out there. And she was calling us saying, do you have any information on where the fire is and which direction it's going? Because I need to know if I need to hook up my trailer and me and my boys get out of this campground, and where do we go to find safety? That was one thing, but she was just in her camper trailer, or RV, fifth wheel, whatever. And there wasn't a lot, right? So, but she couldn't hear me standing inside of it, but when she went outside, then we could communicate. So it is as simple as getting outside sometimes, and you need to know where you can listen to people.
There's a lot of metal in those things.
There is a lot of metal. There's a lot of metal. But one thing too that you need to learn, and I know that Russ and Maggie, Russ was, when we started this, and he was listening to the radio net, he lives kind of down in a low area, and in order for him to get any kind of message, even on the ham radio channel, to come through, he knew that if he wanted to get any kind of emergency message, he had to get out and go to the top of the hill in his neighborhood, because he knew at that point, he did learn by trying to listen to something on his radio at night at home, he was not going to get a message there. So if there's a certain time on a certain day that people know we're going to send out a message, then Russ knows at that point to get that message, he needs to be somewhere where he can hear that. Okay, so it's good to know by turning your radio on at 9 o'clock at night, if you can get a signal. If not, then the next night you may need to drive to a higher location to say, okay, if I want to hear a message, if I want to be in touch with people, then this is where I need to be. So it's good to know if you can hear on that channel from your home. So that was a valuable lesson for Russ, because he would have thought that, you know, he was just out of communication altogether. But it's good to know these things. To find them out now before it's too late.
That said, what Joan's talking about, turn your radio to RAP on the bottom row of numbers. Turn it to, it says rapid, RAP, and listen at 9 o'clock. And if you can hear that radio net, you could talk too, but don't do it without a license. You'll be in trouble.
One thing I don't think I've heard yet is there's a lot of people out there that hear what you're saying.
Yes.
Whatever you're saying, there's people out there.
Yep, there's no security on this.
Yeah.
Anybody can hear anything you're saying.
Right. I was in a car wreck and I had to keep down when I was talking to somebody when I got rear-ended.
Yeah.
And I found out later that how many people were talking about me and what I said on the radio.
Yeah.
Well,
we were listening to our radio, they just had it on in our kitchen one time, and the Sturgis police came across, and they were responding to a call in Sturgis at my youngest daughter's house. I'm like, well, that's weird. We better call her up right now. So Joan calls her. What's going on at your house? Nothing. So she truly wasn't in trouble, but it was a neighborhood situation there. There's a drug thing going on. The cops were looking for somebody, and they were actually behind her house. And we found out about it just by chance because the radio was on. But it's not good to hear about your kids on the radio. Anyway. But we scan the police, and that helps, police and fire, and we kind of have an idea what's going on, so.
Well, speaking of Joan's comment there, you know, we got Skyline Drive kind of cuts Rapid City, and, you know, so you know, if you're on the west side of town, you're probably not going to get a hold of somebody on the south side of town. It's just the way it is, you know, so.
Yeah.
You kind of know the people around in your area.
Yep.
Or if you have to, you know, you could always talk to them, but.
I mean, people, that's a good idea. There's what's called propagation now. From Scott's house, which is amazing. Everybody know where Scott Craig lives? Yeah. He's kind of in a valley back in a hole. From his house, I can hit the Rapid City repeater. But the strange thing about it, there's a big exercise thing on the corner, big building, really big metal building. I think there's propagation of radio signals off that building because line of sight, you can see the airport. So radio waves can bounce off this stuff, and really quickly, because we're running out of time, or we're out of time, there's different types of radios out there. So these little radios can get to ham radio operators that have radios that have HF capabilities and they listen all the time. So what that means is HF radio communications, those radio waves go up to the ionosphere and bounce back down. That's why you can talk to somebody in Alaska or, you know, any place around the world, Japan or whatever, because those waves go clear up to the ionosphere and bounce back down with that type of radio. So like in the emergency like Hurricane Katrina, Red Cross set up a radio and somebody in New Orleans needed to get a hold of a family member in Deadwood. So that person went to the Red Cross tent and said, hey, I need to get a hold of this person. And we have no cell phones, we have no service in New Orleans at all. But they had ham radio operators, and they got to their relative in Deadwood to say they were okay. So that's how that works.
Okay, military.
On Sunday mornings, does the security team have their radios on?
Yes.
Okay, because I live on Lower Spring Creek Road, and one Sunday when we didn't make it to church, I just went out and tried to get a hold of you, and obviously I got to get on a higher,
Yeah, we don't talk much. We're pretty quiet.
Right.
But I mean, if I was calling.
Yeah, get a hold of Channel 3.
Yeah, that's what I was on. So.
Yep. Call us on. Make sure you're on high power.
Okay.
That's it. So. Okay.
What about the idea we have to charge them, so you need electricity for that, but what if you don't have electricity anymore?
Okay, that's where your solar generators come in and solar panels. Because the solar setup to charge these batteries are very, very inexpensive. You can go to Harbor Freight and get the whole setup that doesn't cost much at all. And it's always there for you, and the power goes out, you plug it into that solar panel and wait till it charges up. Yes. Yep.
Are you going to have a little class for us dummies?
You know, we've had several classes, and there's a couple times that we had another commitment, and we forgot to say we're not going to show up, and some people showed up, and we weren't there. And we've had some successful classes, but we kind of stopped that because we haven't had much attendance. Okay. Okay. We can start those up. We did them Wednesday before the Bible study, and that was kind of a popular.
Not this Wednesday though, because we have a B meeting.
Yeah.
So don't come this Wednesday expecting radio questions and
Are
answers.
those one piece?
Yeah, right, I know.
What's that?
Are they one piece or two piece?
Well, you have the battery that comes out.
Okay.
Other than that, it's just
So speaking.
yeah. You can charge the battery outside the radio if you have a certain type. Like this one has a charging port on it,
Yeah.
so it doesn't have to be in the radio in the charger. You can just plug the battery in and charge it. Extra
That was
batteries.
my point, Elaine. I was gonna point out to Sharon is, if you're worried about battery life, you can always get an extra battery, and then, you know, you can keep whatever extra, you know, in your little Faraday device that you make or whatever, and you can, you know, keep one charged for the month, and then, you know, put the one that you have been using that's fully charged, you know, away, use the one that you had been storing, so they both get used and they're both, one's not just totally set aside and was fully charged 5 years ago, the last time you actually brought it out and tried to use it. So do those kind of things. Keep one charged and then rotate them that kind of way.
John, you might give the little one to Bill, and then he can show the difference between it right there on the table behind it.
Yeah, this has an extended battery on it. The radio itself is this portion right here. So like this one right here, these are the same exact radio. One just has an extended battery, so one's longer than the other. But both of them, the radio portion is just the top portion.
They come with the regular batteries. I mean, you guys, I have bought them, yes. But, yeah, we just bought these. Don Pro put us into getting the extra battery pack, higher, longer battery life. And so we did. We just, Don told us where to go get them, if they're online, whatever. But, so now we have one extended battery and one regular battery for each of our radios. And we make sure that we interchange them and keep them charged, that kind of thing. So it's good to have an extra battery.
And there's a lot to this.
There's the capability to charge it outside the charger.
Yes, this one you don't have to have the radio on. You can just put it. If you're using one battery, you can use this. You can have this battery in the charger, you know, while you're still using the one. So anyway.
There's an antenna called the Slim Jim. It's long, and you take a rock, tie it on a string, and tie the string on the end of the antenna, throw it up in a tree, and hoist it up, and your antenna's way up in the tree, and you stand there and you have an antenna. It's portable. So there's lots of different ways to get a lot more range out of these radios.
How long does it take to charge approximately?
If it's completely drained down, it normally takes a couple hours, maybe 3 hours, and it charges up. But when you just top it off, it just, sometimes you put it on there and 5 minutes later, it's charged. Your little light will turn green on your charging and stuff. So we've kind of gone over a lot of time here, but I can take a couple more questions as long as you want.
This is just a basic radio operation, how to operate the radio. So I'll just kind of start passing them around for you guys that want to have the basic Baofeng radio information, how it functions and
Was there any
that
other
kind of
questions
thing.
before we wrap this up? Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate your time.
You want to go down that road?
That was certainly a blessing, I think. Thank you very much. Son of a gun, that was an amazing blessing. I had no idea. And covered a lot of territory that we want. I'd say the meeting's about over. And so I will sort of scoop through here. CB, we talked about the CB radio, the ham radio. We've got all that covered. Let me just pop through your right and see if there's anything else we need to do. What is this one here? Does that say gather family yet? We're up to transportation. We'll just leave it that way. Just some of the notes that Roger put in here. We have you have any kind of a prearranged rendezvous plans if your family split up? If you had a disruption, where would you meet? And when would you expect your family to show up? I mean, there's some things there that you just, like my kids were coming from Sioux Falls. I mean, if they had to walk, how long would that take them? Just as an example, So, practice with, the other thing Roger put in here, practice by leaving all your technology at home. For either tracking or otherwise, or see if you can live without the internet for a week or a day or 5 minutes. And can you live without your cell phone? No, I can't until you take it away. But I did have a guy take it away one time for 3 days, and I found that I got along pretty good. And but I won the bet, so that was why $100, and I won that I could do that. And so, and then I didn't want it back. They made me take it back. So practice power outage for a day in your house. What would you do? How'd you cook? I think we're up to transportation. What still works? If your car breaks down and can't be used in a temporary situation, or it's just rendered helpless from some sort of attack, the car can't be used in a long term, which the EMP, we talked about that. And Craig's sure enough right. Run out of gas, or run out of diesel, and it's over. You just park it over there and somebody can steal tires or whatever. Because that's going to be the end of that until you have fuel. So, the other thing I think we really need to think about is we are getting, this is my opinion, is that they are ruining our dollar. Whoever they are, I mean, that is, they're doing a pretty good job of just making that dollar get worthless and worthless and less and less and less. And I think it's to make it into a digital dollar, one world system, one world government, one world currency. And then there's another group that's going to cause some problems because they're cutting back on our diesel. They're cutting down our big diesel engines. They're cutting back on the DEF, which is actually stems. What's that thing stands for? Diesel exhaust. Yeah, I mean they're cutting that thing back. It comes from urea. Guess who ships that? Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Egypt. Those are your main people that ship urea that let our semis run. We're in some trouble on this program, so we need to be ready before the grocery store shelves are empty. So that again may meet with some resistance, but I truly believe, looking around, that is the case. And so I might, is this the cars and trucks? That's what that is. We'll just keep on going. We could send this out to you if you want to read through it and check with electric transportation. Again, you got to have a solar power to charge your bike or your moped or your scooter. And those work pretty good, but I'm assuming in a big wreck you're going to have them in a Faraday cage. Carpool, electric. What are we doing here? Go back one. Carpool. This is just, Roger thought this was a great idea. Just to, you know how to take care of your family, your neighbors, and your church folk. to save on gas, if in fact your outfit will run. And of course a motorcycle, if you need to get water, if you need to carry it, I guess you're going to be afoot if you don't have fuel. But a motorcycle trailer, a wagon, ATVs, those are wonderful for hauling water, and they're effective, and you can and they can go cross country. You know, on communication we did miss two things. The shofar was used at one time, you know, for communication, and the other thing is smoke signals. Yep. The Indians, you know, and I'm married to one down here, so you know, at one time I thought that was kind of neat, but I don't know any smoke signal language, so but I thought I'd bring them up just in case, so you knew that I was trying to be thorough. And then the other thing that is really wonderful, I grew up on a horse. If you're needing to get someplace and you have a rope and or some feed, getting a horse routed up is a pretty good thing to do. He'll take you a long ways. Walking, I'm not going to talk about this much because I can't walk. Well, I can now. My wife walks a lot, and I can keep up with her on my scooter or my bike, and that's a wonderful thing. But and now that I got new knees, I can get a lot closer. So you might want to look at that deal and be in shape if we have a problem. Be able to walk to the next county or the next area, or you know, it's you know, a flat walk is. It doesn't, it goes, you know, you wear out pretty quick if you're not kind of in shape, or if you've had some health problems. So we need to know how to take care of that. Own a bike or two. So we got walking, where are we at here on this one? Walking, continue. We'll skip that. And again, more walking. If you're going to go and you're going to walk, you need to have a go pack, something that so you stay hydrated and some energy in there. So this is just stuff, pull along wagon to take care of water. This is just some stuff just to spark the interest or to spark a little bit of preparation. So we'll go through there. Get a paper map of the city. I don't know if you can get one or not. I don't know. You can get the little tourist map, but I don't know if you can get a full map like they used to have back in the day before we had internet on our phone. So, what's that?
Chamber of Commerce.
Chambers does have it? Walter? Perfect. Yeah, that'd be I know they have the little maps, but the big full page one, well, we should check and see. Let's see. Worst case scenario, communications, in-person, face-to-face, or a courier system. And then transportation, the worst case would be a walk or a bike, and then are you ready? And so, you know, I appreciate you taking a few minutes of that communications class, and this demonstration here on our fires is wonderful. I mean, and so I'm truly thankful for that. I would finish by I do want to throw questions.
What about pigeons?
Huh?
Pigeons.
Well, we have pigeons where I work. We feed them, and we don't shoot them. But they don't deliver anything but poop on the floor. So I don't know about that.
They don't taste good.
A true landline, not your cordless phone,
Yeah.
will work, but the other person has to have a landline.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you got to know the phone number too. So. So. The other communication that we do have, and I've got this, I really want to read it to you because it's communication for our good. And we have some people in here probably that hate Facebook, and I understand that. But I want to just read you this on Facebook and then give you a final goodbye. And so it's, Lord, I want to give you thanks for Facebook. I want to thank you that the enemy created a highway for us to evangelize the world. We're very thankful. Thank you, Lord, for your airways. I thank you, Lord, for telling us what the wicked has stored up and has been given to the righteous. So God, I claim Facebook for your kingdom. I claim Facebook for your kingdom today. I thank you, God, for the highway to travel on to evangelize the world today. Lord, we bless you and we give you praise that your angels go before us, behind us, and all around us as we fight for our freedom, fight for the freedom of our lives, the freedom of our generations. In the name of Jesus, Yeshua, amen. Amen. And I will see you on the sea of fire and glass when the smoke clears. Good night.